Welcome back to Relationships at Work, the leadership mindset guide to creating a workplace we love. I'm your host, Russel Lolacher, a communications and leadership nerd with decades of experience in both of those areas. Also a heap of curiosity on how we can make the workplace a better place. If you're a leader trying to understand and improve your impact on work culture and the employee experience, you're in the right place. This is the Raw Note mini episode version of the show, dropping every Thursday as a quick and valuable bit of information to help shift our mindsets and help us get curious on top of our regular show. So for our Raw Note this week, I'm passing on to you, well, it's the sixth in our 7 Deadly Sins of Leadership series. So what's number 6? Drum roll goes here. Accountability? I think that's somebody else's problem. As I've said on the show throughout this series, I am not worried about bad leadership. So many times we hear about people leaving organizations because of bad leadership, not because of the jobs. Well, I actually disagree with that. I'm worried about leadership ecosystems that allow bad leaders and perpetuate it. Now, in this series, we've talked about previous sins like being too busy, fearing conflict, lacking curiosity, no follow-up, or the last one, which was all about the gap between words said and actions taken. And now we're going to get into the accountability of it all. I was recently listening to KCRW's The Business Podcast, where they talked to Maureen Ryan on her book, Burn It Down, which is all about, and I think you have to say it like that when you read the book, Burn It Down. It's about the toxicity of Hollywood. Here's a spoiler for you. It's a really toxic place to work, especially. One story really stuck out at me as they were discussing the different responses to the horrible work cultures that were happening, specifically on the TV show Lost. I was a huge fan of that show back in the day, so this story kind of jumped out at me. Its creators both responded to these allegations and reports of horrible work culture by one denying anything ever happened at all, and the other one said, well, I guess I failed as a leader? What really jumped out at me out of this, after both being showed multiple cases, documents, interviews, both of them said, I don't recall any of this. I laugh out of tears and frustration. This is a lesson in the difference between being responsible versus being accountable. Now, in Indeed.ca, that really great website for applying for jobs and posting resumes and so forth, they have a really great definition of each of these. Responsibility is referring to someone's duty to carry out a task to completion, while accountability generally refers to what happens after something has happened. So responsibility is in doing the job. That's right there in the job description, getting things done, including leadership. Leadership absolutely is a responsibility. We have a responsibility to not only deliver a thing or a service, but also to create a psychologically safe environment, offer professional development, create new leaders. Accountability is about the results. It's about being responsible for the outcomes of your actions and inactions, good or bad. So we're responsible for a psychological safe environment, but we're accountable to whether it actually is or isn't. We're responsible for professional development for our team, and we're accountable on whether it was the right training, whether it was effective training, whether they took the training, if they are better employees, staff, colleagues for taking that training, or worse, right? In the case of the TV show Lost, the directors, the producers behind the show, they were responsible for creating a television show. They were also responsible for how that show was created, creatively, and its environment, okay? But they also were accountable, even though it really didn't seem like they were, for the ramifications of those decisions, for the ramifications of how what they did and didn't do created this really toxic environment through their actions and inactions. So they nailed the responsible part, they failed the accountable part. One other thing to my comments earlier about we create good leaders, like that's something we're responsible for, but we're also accountable for the good and bad leaders. So here's where we get into the sinfulness of this leadership thing. We as leaders are accountable for those leaders that we create. We're accountable if they're good, we're accountable if they're bad, we're accountable for the impact they have on their employees and their cultures. If we don't take accountability as leaders or as an organization, then we're just ignoring the importance of being effective. We're only doing half the job, and we're demonstrating that there is actually no consequence for quality. Bad leaders just get to be bad because no one wants to take accountability for them. Great leaders are both responsible and accountable. So if we do produce bad leaders, we recognize it and correct the behavior of the bad leader because their failure is our failure. So what's the road to accountability? I think first we need to start with setting some clear expectations. Because when leaders know what is expected of them, it becomes easier for them to take ownership of their responsibilities and deliver on their commitments. We need to clearly define their roles, their responsibilities, their deadlines, and encourage some open communication to address any uncertainties. It's the ownership piece that really leads to that accountability. Second, how about encouraging regular check-ins? Because I think it's important to set up leaders for success by making tweaks along the way as we need to. Hold one-on-one meetings to discuss ongoing projects, provide feedback, address any challenges. It's also an opportunity for us to recognize and appreciate their efforts. We're taking responsibility, but we're also taking accountability through their leadership journey. And I think that's really important because being accountable at the end is absolutely important, but I think it means more, it has more traction, it means more to us as leaders if we are a part of the entire journey along the way as well. And last but not least, delivering consequences. So when mistakes happen, we have to focus on learning from them rather than blaming them as individuals. And then collaboratively, we can make sure it doesn't happen again. And also make sure successes are recognized. That's important too. We can't just turn a blind eye to go, oh, that's just they're doing their job. We have to milestone that stuff. Success it. Rave about it. Consequences don't just need to be negative. Responsibility without accountability is not real leadership. It just becomes a checked box exercise demonstrating to other leaders, new, emerging, that quality doesn't matter. What kind of modeling are we doing? What kind of image are we portraying for other leaders that are trying to look to us to go, oh, is that what leadership is? Because if we're not accountable, it doesn't matter if good leaders or bad leaders, or whether they produce good or bad leaders. It doesn't matter because no one's accountable for it. We're just letting it happen and moving on. For a great leader and a great culture, we have to prioritize both. Truthfully, if you've been listening to this series, it's sinful otherwise. And that will wrap up the 6th in our series of 7 deadly sins of leadership. I'm Russel Lolacher, and you've been listening to Relationships at Work, the leadership mindset guide to creating a workplace we love. And I hope you're loving the show. I love putting this out for you. It's a blast. I love meeting new people that I can introduce to you as we dig into some pretty cool topics. And also these mini episodes where I get to explore curiosity and mindset shifts of my own with you. So if you've been enjoying the show, I ask that you please reach out to others and share it with them. It doesn't have to be all your friends. That'd be great. But if it's just 1 or 2 other people and you're like, you know what, you should really check out Relationships at Work. Here's a link. Whatever, however you like to share information, really appreciate it. It only helps the show grow. You have a great day. Take care.